Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu is a Ranker. On this episode we're going to be continuing our Albums of the Year list. This time it's 2014, and 2014 is actually a pretty good year. Tons of new blood on this list, and I had to leave records off this list that I really wanted to get on the list, so no complaints from me about this year. So without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are my personal top 10 albums from 2014. So we're going to be kicking off this list with the debut self-titled album by Always, which is spelt with two V's instead of a W. And what is it with that trend? I mean, last year you had Churches spelling their name with a V instead of a U, and what's next? The Shins spelling their name with a T instead of an N? Anyway, here we have this year's winner of Typical Indie Album of the Year award, and you know the criteria for typical indie: lots of clean, arpeggiated jangle guitars covered in reverb, a gentle twee atmosphere, and sticky, sweet melodies. And this particular album leans into the jangle elements pretty hard, and it feels a lot like those post-Smiths jangle bands that were so prevalent in the late 80s. Singer Molly Rankin has a delightful voice that fits the dream pop vibes, and the album is universally pleasant and cohesive. Tracks like Archie Marry Me and Atop a Cake are immediately hooky and catchy. Party Police has some atmospheric post-punkery to it, and beautiful ballad The Agency Group is all weeping melodies and tumbling emotions. So yeah, whilst never going to change anybody's life, this is a lovely typical indie record with lots of easy charm to it, and a perfect way to be curtain jerking this list. Next up we have El Pintor, which was the fifth album by post-punk icons Interpol, and El Pintor, which means the painter in Spanish, is also an anagram of the band's name Interpol, which, you know, is a bit of trivia, I guess. Anyway, on this album, singer Paul Banks has taken over on bass duties, as the band's extremely fashionable bassist Carlos Dengler departed after the previous album. And Banks' more straight-ahead driving style does steer the band in a more kind of rocking direction here, and this feels like the band's most overtly aggressive record. Tracks like All the Rage Back Home, My Desire, and Anywheres feel like the band's most punky tracks, whilst album highlight Same Town New Story develops Daniel Kessler's repetitive guitar riff style to amazing effect. I mean, that track just has such an ear-catchingly cool groove to it. It just sounds sleazy and dirty. That said, not everything is perfect here, as the B-side of the record features a few rare filler tracks by the band, most notably the water-treading Tidal Wave and the humdrum closer Twice as Hard. But the best material on this ranks up with the band's very best, and the harder elements to this record see it gather enough pace to keep up with the competition on this list. Next up we have St. Vincent's self-titled fourth LP, and on this Miss Vincent is taking a small step forward into poppier territory, as each subsequent record of hers becomes just a little bit more accessible than the last. Indeed, the two singles off of this, Birth in Reverse and Digital Witness, are among her catchiest offerings to date, and are pretty damn awesome. Other highlights include the stripped back Prince Johnny, the obfuscating keyboard lines of Huey Newton, the sweeping balladry of Closer's Severed Crossed Fingers, and the catchy slithering opener Rattlesnake. So yeah, this is just another quality release from St. Vincent, and the only negative thing I can really say about it is that it's just a little too similar to her previous record Strange Mercy, but not quite as good. That said, when taken in isolation, it's still a really great album and an easy placing on this list. Next up we have Ultraviolence, which was the third album by alternative pop diva Lana Del Rey, who always kind of reminds me of like an upside down Dark World version of Adele. Her records are drenched in sadness, desperation, and tons of delay and reverb. It's an atmospheric mix that always seems to have one eye on the distant past while also sounding modern. And these are songs that sound like they could be the theme tunes to the next James Bond movie. Hell, the track Shades of Cool even seems to have a snatch of the guitar figure from 007's main theme in it. But the best thing about this record is the overall feeling and atmosphere. Each of the tracks seems to melt into the texture of the album, leaving individual highlights a bit redundant to mention, to be honest, but if you insist. Cruel World is just an amazing opener with its desperate chorus being really impressive. Pretty When I Cry is catchy in its miserable dovetailing sadness, whilst Fucked My Way to the Top lingers in the memory for obvious reasons. So yeah, this is a relaxing, atmospheric slice of misery brought to life by Lana's exquisitely beautiful voice, and when compared to Adele, I think Lana Del Rey's style and lyrics are just way more interesting and alluring. Coming in next, we have The Unraveling by indie post-punk shoegaze hybrids We Were Promised Jetpacks, which was the band's third album, and on this the band are putting aside verses and choruses for more experimental and organic song structures. Most of these tracks ebb and flow, building up from small beginnings to thunderous maelstroms. The record is consistent and cohesive, with no bad tracks and plenty of emotional lyrics and catchy vocals. Highlights on a stacked record include the rhythmically building blast of thunder that is I Keep It Composed, the blitzkrieg guitar riffs of Night Terror, the Radiohead-esque atmospherics of Disconnecting, and the relentless groove of Bright Minds. So yeah, despite its god-awful artwork, which gives me like a fucking brain aneurysm every time I look at it, this is just another fantastic LP by We Were Promised Jetpacks, and a very easy placing on this list. So we're going to be kicking off the top 5 with Sun Structures, which was the debut album by Temples, and Temples are a throwback band to 1960s psychedelia with some Eastern mysticism thrown in. Imagine a modern updating of Kuda Shaker and you're not going to be far off. This album is 12 songs and 52 minutes long, which is a hefty length for a psychedelic record. I mean, there's always a danger that those kinds of albums are going to get boring over a longer runtime, so kudos to Temples because that's just not the case with this. The record is consistent and entertaining the whole way through, and as usual for this genre of music, you can expect lots of florid guitars, maxed out mixing desks, and really dense soundscapes that are full of hidden details. Highlights on this include the title track Sun Structures, which has a totally badass instrumental closing section, Golden Throne, which has amazing Arabian sounding riffs and organs, Move with the Season with its callbacks to the Zombies' masterpiece Odyssey and Oracle, and Sand Dance with its cool Eastern riffs and again, badass instrumental sections. So yeah, this is just an excellent album of psychedelia, and to be honest, I don't see how you can get much better than this within this genre and at this time in history. It's just really impressive stuff. Next up, we have Bury Me at Makeout Creek, which was the third album by American-Japanese singer-songwriter Mitski. Her first 2 records were self-released and were more kind of piano-based, but on this, her label debut, she's taken a sideways step into lo-fi punk and guitar-based art pop. And it's around this time in history that you can really sense the influence of PJ Harvey, as her sticky fingers can be heard all over this, and also St. Vincent's record from earlier in the list. And there's just something about Mitski. I mean, it's kind of hard to put my finger on. I mean, there are just so many lo-fi, punky girl singer-songwriters around at this time, but for whatever reason, I just kind of gravitate towards Mitski over the others. I mean, it could be the defiant yet vulnerable lyrics, the weird turns into off-kilter melodies, or the underlying feeling that she's kind of shooting for something that she's unlikely to attain. Whatever the case, Mitski has just an undeniably twee charm to her, and her music is just really addictive for me. This album is 10 tracks and only 30 minutes long, so it absolutely zips by. Highlights include Drunk Walk Home, which has some cool art rock energy and stream of consciousness lyrics on it. I Don't Smoke has those off-kilter melodies that are mentioned in spades, while late album tracks I Will and Carry Me Out add some catchy zill to the back end. My favourite off of this though is First Love / Late Spring with its gorgeous melodies and skittering keyboards. So yeah, Mitski and this LP definitely get a thumbs up from me. Coming in third place and taking home the bronze medal, we have World Peace Is None of Your Business by Morrissey. And this is the first Morrissey album since the early 90s to not feature Alan White as a songwriting partner, as he and Morrissey had fallen out after their previous LP, Years of Refusal. But Morrissey's younger collaborators bring a freshness to his canon, which results in his very best late period record. And this sees Morrissey delving into world music, from the didgeridoos that open the album, to the Eastern riffs of Constantinople, to the Parisian accordions of Earth is the Loneliest Planet, to the Spanish mariachi flavours of The Bullfighter Dies and Kiss Me a Lot. There's just a lot of interesting sonic textures on offer, which makes this one of his most musically entertaining and diverse albums. Morrissey's lyrics are excellent on this too, with the bard turning in one of his most politically charged and funniest sets to date. And the record is consistent all the way through with no weak tracks. My favourite moment on the album comes via Staircase at the University, a supremely catchy slice of Morrissey, rendered unforgettable by both its hilarious final stanza of "If you break both your legs, don't come running to me," and its sublime Spanish guitar outro. Sadly though, this is also one of the most undersold Morrissey records, as Morrissey, being a bit of a tool as Morrissey's want to be from time to time, dressed down the boss of his label over the lack of promotion in such a severe way that the label immediately dropped him and ceased printing the album, which unfortunately makes this record a bit of a rarity these days. Despite that though, it's well worth tracking down because yeah, it's just fantastic. Silver medal time, and the silver medal is going to go to Attica, which was the fifth album by Wussy. And yeah, Wussy? What? Who? I mean, I feel you. You know, I'd never heard of Wussy before this week either, but my research into the best albums of 2014 kept pointing me in the direction of this LP, so I checked it out and yeah, fair play. This album absolutely rules. As far as I can tell, this is regarded as Wussy's masterwork, and if not their breakout into the mainstream, then certainly their breakout into critical adoration. And well deserved it is. This record basically takes the 1980s and throws it into the blender, resulting in a delicious smoothie of all the best cherry-picked parts. And whilst Wussy could never be accused of being the most original band, they certainly could be noted as one of the most diverse. Opening track Teenage Wasteland is a really immediate slice of early 90s shoegaze. Rainbows and Butterflies replicates Sonic Youth's brand of post-punk, whilst Bug sounds like Kiss Me Kiss Me Kiss Me era Cure. So at this point you think you might have the band pegged. Some shoegaze, some post-punk, a little dream pop maybe, but nope. North Sea Girl sticks his middle finger up at that, bringing Britpop style melodies and a sense of light tweeness to the record. Then the next track, Acetylene, is a stripped back old country ballad, at which point you just decide to give up trying to pigeonhole the band. And then comes the whole REM thing. You see, there are two vocalists in Wussy, one male, one female, and they split the album up equally between them, and both singers are equally awesome. But damn, the male singer sounds so much like Michael Stipe. And there are a few tracks on this where the band do go full on early REM. I mean, you could play the tracks To the Lightning and Gene I Dream to any REM fan and convince them that you found a rare offcut from Life's Rich Pageant. But I mean that in the best possible way, as, you know, if you knocked off the two weakest tracks from Life's Rich Pageant and replaced them with these songs, you'd probably have a stronger record, which is saying something as Life's Rich Pageant absolutely rules. Other highlights include the stripped back yet also killer style sing-along readiness of Halloween, the energized chorus and balladry of title track Attica, the gorgeous duet of closing track Beautiful, which features both the band's vocalists in fine fettle. So yeah, this is just an album with no weak tracks. Every song has its own hook or atmospheric reason for being, and it's just an amazing love letter to the 1980s and essential listening if you love the classics from the era. And let's face it, who doesn't? So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the gold medal for 2014 is going to go to Nobody Wants to Be Here and Nobody Wants to Leave, which was the fourth LP by post-punk outfit The Twilight Sad. And until this point, the band had been gathering power with each successive release, presenting a group of albums that displayed huge potential, but without ever quite hitting perfection. The band always seemed like they might have a towering masterpiece in them somewhere, and finally, on this album, it arrives. So yeah, there's not so much to say about this record, to be honest, as it's just the sound of a band hitting their natural zenith. Songwriting, production, emotional impact, it's just all coming together on this record to distill a perfect shape. 10 tracks, 43 minutes, every song is fantastic, the atmosphere is thick and cohesive, and the best tracks are saved for the latter part of the album, which is a trick I always appreciate. Highlights on a pretty flawless 5-star record include the lead single Last January, which slowly builds into a squalling maelstrom. It Never Was the Same is an epic emotional ballad. That refrain of "We've fallen, we fall apart" it's just so damn anthemic and catchy. In Nowheres is an awesome slice of punky shoegaze, and The Pills I Swallow really reminds me of the Smiths. Not in direct style exactly, but just how it makes me feel. And to that end, the whole record is kind of like that for me. It just feels like the song That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, stretched over the course of an entire album, but in the best possible way. My favourite off of this though is the crushing title track, Nobody Wants to Be Here and Nobody Wants to Leave, which is one of my very favourite breakup songs of all time. I mean, the sadness that comes rolling off James Graham's voice as he begs his lover to stay just one more night is just heart-wrenching. Where he sings the line, "I don't know where it all went wrong," it just sounds like it comes up from the depths of his soul. It's just really intense and awesome. So yeah, in my opinion, this is just one of the greatest post-punk records ever recorded, right up there with Unknown Pleasures, Pornography or Disintegration, and it's easily my pick for the best of 2014. And that's my list, but that might not be your list. Please sound off in the comment section and tell me all the classic records that I've missed from 2014. Like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to check back for my 2015 list. Keep yourself healthy, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.